So, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 13, Rabindranath Tagore. And our topic is differences with Gandhi. The essence of Gandhi's entire political philosophy is in the Hind Swaraj, 1908, and Tagore's in Savdeshi Samaj, 1904. Both of them had a great deal of respect and reverence for one another, though this mutual respect did not prohibit them from expressing basic disagreements about their respective perception of contemporary reality and the desired nature of the movements in the given Indian situation. A major controversy erupted between them following Gandhi's return to India from South Africa and his meteoric rise in the Indian politics, culminating in the non-cooperation movement and Tagore's articulation of a philosophy of universalism and his criticism of the cult of nationalism during the First World War. Tagore regarded India's basic problem to be social and not political, though, like Gandhi, he was conscious of the acute differences and conflicts in the Indian society. As such, society and not politics was his primary area of focus. He could perceive that the triumph of science had united the whole country into one, which made possible for seeking a unity that was not political. This perception led him to conclude that India could offer a solution to this regard, for she never had a real sense of nationalism. Regarding the nationalist upsurge, he was convinced that it would popularize the struggle for independence, but would be unproductive in the overall context of its own development, for the quest of freedom would be imperil its realization. Tagore developed this argument after a careful scrutiny of the Gandhian leadership and strategy. He derived the basic framework of this evaluation from his earlier experiences during the days of agitation against Bengal partition of 1905. In that movement, initially, Tagore took an active part, popularizing Raksha Bandhan and nationalistic songs. It was immediately during the period after the publication of Savdeshi Samaj that he passionately pleaded for the revitalization of the decaying villages and creation of new awareness amongst the ordinary people. Though initially he was in the forefront of the movement, he became disillusioned since he could very clearly see that there was no concern about the need for mass awareness and that the city based middle class were keen on protecting its own selfish interest. After withdrawing from the movement, he made serious attempts to rebuild the village life within the Zamindari system, the then prevailing system. This background is important for comprehending his basic disagreement with Gandhi. Tagore's first written evidence about Gandhi's preferences and policies were in a letter written on 12th April 1919 from Shantiniketan, advising Gandhi to be cautious about the program of non cooperation, for in no way did it represent India's moral superiority. He took note of the important changes that came with the rise of Gandhi in Indian politics. He thought very highly of Gandhi's leadership and could also see that the proposed non cooperation movement would engulf the whole country and would be much bigger than the anti partition movement of Bengal. He could also grasp the important difference between the present phase and the earlier ones. Earlier, the political leaders did not look beyond the English educated people, whereas in contrast, Gandhi emerged as the spokesperson of millions of poor illiterate Indians. He spoke their language and wore their dress. Though his precepts were political and not bookish, they lacked logic and scientific reasoning. They did not contain a philosophy for awakening the nation. Instead of following the path of truth, Gandhi attempted a shortcut by taking the very easy path. Subsequently, he perturbed by the fact that everyone talked in the same voice and made the same gestures and characterized this development as symbolizing the worst manifestations of nationalism, for it indicated a selfish mentality and had nothing to do with the alien rule. What he resented most was the fact that the Gandhian directives, which included manual spinning of yarn and burning of foreign clothes, were medieval in nature. None of these stipulations were dissected critically and were accepted as dogmas. The Gandhian directives were followed mechanically and not rationally. Moreover, the emphasis on simplicity would retard economic advancement, for the narrow form of Swadeshi would only result in restrictive provincial attitude, isolationism, and provoke unnecessary hostility in the rest of the world. Gandhi's plan would lead to India's isolation, preventing Western knowledge and advancements from reaching India. Disagreeing with Gandhi, Tagore pointed out that it was not possible to estimate the exact magnitude of ideal time among the middle class, and that peasants who constituted 80% of the Indian population without a meaningful occupation for 6 months in a year. He wondered whether it was desirable to popularize the use of spinning wheel. Instead, he preferred constructive programs like cooperative agriculture, for that would eliminate the malice of small, unproductive holdings and fight poverty. He felt that popularizing a scientific concept like cooperative agriculture would be more important than any political action. He thought it was wrong of Gandhi to instruct Indian women to stop reading English and also opposed Gandhi's call for boycott of government schools. Though critical of the existing system, he felt that in the absence of a better alternative, it would only result in perpetuating ignorance, superstitions, and backwardness. In 1928, Tagore criticized Gandhi's defense of Varnashram by arguing that the system was inefficient as the occupation follows birth and not individual capacity. Heredity occupation was mechanical, repetitive, obstructed innovation, and retarded human freedom. He lamented that a true Kshatriya was conspicuous by its absence in India. Similarly, he dismissed Gandhi's blame on untouchability as the cause of Bihar earthquake on 5th February 1934 as unscientific, unreasonable, and that it failed to explain the fact as to why the poor and the lower caste suffered more than the privileged and upper caste. On 20th May 1939, in a letter to Congress, he warned against the worship of power within the Congress. When some of Gandhi's followers compared Gandhi to Mussolini and Hitler, thus insulting Gandhi before the entire world. As a desired alternative, Tagore pleaded for universal humanity and gave a call for recognizing the vast dimensions of India in its world context, because henceforth any nation which seeks isolation for itself must come into conflict with the time spirit and find no peace. From now onward, the thinking of every nation will have to be international. It is the striving of the new age to develop in the mind this faculty of universality. In response to these charges, Gandhi replied that Indian nationalism is not exclusive, nor aggressive, nor destructive. It is health giving, religious, and therefore humanitarian. He defended the use of the spinning wheel, for that was the only way to realize the essential and living oneness of interest among India's myriads. Its purpose was to symbolize sacrifice for the whole nation. To the charges of narrow provincialism and dangers of his kind of nationalism, he pointed out, I hope I am as great a believer in free air as the great poet. I do not want my house to be walled in on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the cultures of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible. But I refuse to be blown off my feet by any. Furthermore, Gandhi did not regard his patriotism to be exclusive. It is calculated not only to hurt any other nation but to benefit all in the true sense of the word. India's freedom as conceived by me can never be a menace to the world. Tagore too shared the same attitude towards cultural diversity, but was more cautious than Gandhi for his perception of possible decay and degeneration, as he saw in the later developments at the time of the partition of Bengal in 1905. Roland characterized Tagore's revolt against Gandhi as the revolt of the free soul. Tagore's article, The Call of Truth, and Gandhi's reply in his weekly Young India, which he called the Great Centennial, made wonderful reading. They represent two aspects of the truth, neither of which could be ignored. Tagore's role was that of a critical but sympathetic observer of the nationalist upsurge in India, which he wanted to be based both on reason and a concern for the masses. He criticized Gandhi whenever he felt that the Mahatma was deviating from these planks. He not only criticized but also provided an alternative perception of to that of Gandhi. He acknowledges his greatness and lauded his role in fighting casteism, untouchability, and communalism, but was equally forthright in pointing out the limitations of Gandhian schemes. For instance, he criticized Mahatma's basic education system of 1937, popularly known as Vardha scheme, on two grounds. First, he questioned the desirability of the procedures of material utility over development of personality. Second, the scheme of the special type of education for the rural people would limit the choice of their vocation, and that it is unfortunate that even in our ideal scheme education should be doled out in insufficient rations to the poor. He identified the lack of basic education as the fundamental cause of many of India's social and economic afflictions and desired lively and enjoyable schools. Tagore had the courage of conviction to point out the inadequacies of Mahatma's vision. Since some of his criticisms are well founded, it is time to work out a synthesis with the experience of last 5 decades, particularly in the major areas of our shortcomings like rulers, reconstruction, education, and provide the requisite incentive for the ruler poor to lead a decent and dignified life. Here we want to wind up this lecture and thank you so much for your attention.